everybody, happy Thursday and welcome to the Feeding Tube Awareness Week video. So if you didn't know, it is actually Feeding Tube Awareness Week and I have had this little feeding tube for going on almost 5 years now. And like I said, happy Thursday. It is my upload day. I was getting ready to upload the vlog for this week and then I remembered it's Feeding Tube Awareness Week and I have to make this video instead. So bear with me, this is going to be a quick little info video about what feeding tubes are, some reasons people may need them, and kind of my experience with different types of feeding tubes over the last almost 5 years, as well as like a little Q&A at the end. I asked these questions, or I put a box up to let y'all ask questions over on my Instagram. My Instagram is just up here, it's lauren.boh. If you missed that and don't follow me on there, make sure to do that. I post all my stories pretty much every single day. And I do a lot of things like this, like questions on there. So I've got some questions from y'all at the end, but first we'll get into what actually is a feeding tube. So there are plenty of different types of feeding tubes depending on what they are used for, but essentially feeding tubes are just a way of people to get nutrition who aren't able to like eat enough or any like real foods to still get the nutrition and hydration that they need. Some of the different types of feeding tubes, I believe most of them, correct me if I'm wrong, this is just what I know from my experience. I'm not a medical professional, I've just had one for a long time. They're the nose tubes, so we've got an NG, ND, and NJ. They go kind of, I'll put a picture in here, but they go like up your nose, down your throat, and into your stomach or your small intestine, depending on where you need it to land. And people need it to land in different places for different things. I have a G tube, and I had an NG tube because it just goes into my stomach. Thankfully, my stomach was able to kind of deal with the liquid food going into it at a slower rate, so I did not need anything more aggressive like an intestinal tube, which would be that ND or NJ tube that would go into your small intestine and just completely bypass your stomach altogether. In terms of surgical tubes, we've got the G, J, G, and GJ tubes, and there's like the peg straight tubes or just like the laparoscopic surgery tubes. I know I just threw a lot of words at you. But the G tube is essentially the same thing as the NG tube. It just is a surgically placed tube, so it goes into your stomach. I know people get them placed either endoscopically or through laparoscopic surgery. Mine was placed through laparoscopic surgery. This is what it looked like when I first got it. It was kind of like a longer dangler tube. And now I have a button that looks more like this. I can probably show you as well. There's my little tube. And I've had a button for the majority of time. My doctors and my team wanted to start with a dangler tube first just because they're a little bit more stable and like sturdy in there. For the first, I believe 3 months was how long I had my dangler, and then I got it changed to a button, and now I've just had buttons ever since. There's also the J tube, which is kind of similar to this little guy, this little button right here. It just goes down more into your small intestine, into your jejunum. And then there's the combo GJ tube, which goes in kind of where mine is, like a G tube. It has a port that goes to your stomach and then also has like a tube that goes down into your small intestine, into your jejunum, so you can access both in there. But yeah, that is like the general overview of what feeding tubes are. People need them for other reasons, not just gastroparesis. There are so many reasons why people might need a feeding tube. It's hard to get into all of them, but we've got like intestinal failure. A lot of people get like a nose tube or some sort of feeding tube during like a long-term cancer treatment where they may not have an appetite or maybe struggling to keep weight on. I have some friends with cystic fibrosis who have it because they also have that hard time keeping weight on or getting enough calories because their body burns through so many calories. So there are literally hundreds of reasons why people may need feeding tubes. So if you see one, you have no idea, like you never know. But they're really helpful for when you need them. And I guess I'll just get into like the question and answers because I've just kind of yapped at you for 5 minutes. All right, so I just got home from work, so I'm a little icky, but it is time to answer to answer your questions that you left me over on Instagram about feeding tubes so that I can get this video up because it is the last day of Feeding Tube Awareness Week and I need it up today because then it's not the week anymore. So the first question I got and get frequently is, why do you have a feeding tube? So people have feeding tubes for lots of different reasons. Like I said, I personally have mine because I have gastroparesis, which is slowing or paralysis of your stomach and intestines. My stomach can kind of go through waves of how well it wants to work. So sometimes I rely a lot more heavily on my feeding tube than others. Sometimes I don't actually need it for a little while for food wise. but when it was placed, I was 100% reliant on my feeding tube for all of my nutrition and hydration. That being said, now that I'm doing better nutritionally, I still do rely on my feeding tube very, very heavily for hydration because I also have POTS and some absorption issues with my nutrition and such in my stomach and intestines. So I do run electrolyte fluids through my tube at least 12 hours a day. And part of that is also why I was able to get my port taken out. I don't have a port anymore. I used to have a port for fluids and infusions. I don't need that anymore, but my tube helps me not need that. Second question I got asked was, how long did it take for you to get used to your feeding tube? So I got my first feeding tube, which was an NG tube, placed almost 5 years ago. That one I never got used to. I always hated having that feeling of something in the back of my throat. But after I had my surgery, physically it probably took a couple months for it to fully like heal and me to be comfortable with my stomach again and not really be in pain. I will say on the flip side of that though, like mentally and emotionally, like how it affects my appearance is still something that trips me up sometimes to this day. I get really self-conscious about it when I'm meeting new people or I'm in new environments. And up until about 1.5 years ago when I met some really great people, I tried to hide it a lot, and I still even sometimes do. So that is something that's kind of, I'm always working on getting used to. Just kind of looking different and having that very outwardly apparent sign that something isn't quite the same. I got a lot of questions like, how long have you had it? How often do you use it? But I feel like I've answered those already, so I'm not going to repeat those. So the next question, I really liked this one. It was, what do you wish everyone, or like, what do you wish you could tell everyone about feeding tubes? And I feel like my biggest ones are always, there are so many reasons why people may have a feeding tube. So if you see one, like, you really never know why someone has it. And two, just because someone has a feeding tube does not mean they cannot eat food by mouth. Some people can't, but some people, like myself, can. This was one of my favorite questions I got about it too, and it actually came from one of my friends. So I think it's funny that like when I post like these little like not anonymous, these like question things, it's like people who even like know me and are pretty comfortable around me will still ask me things that they won't ask me like in person, which is kind of silly. But my friend asked, can you feel it on the inside? And the question, or the answer to that is yes, sometimes you actually can. So the tube is held in with like a little balloon that's under my stomach. And when I am like engaging my core muscles, like working out, or when I'm really hungry are the two times that I feel my feeding tube like on the inside of my stomach, because obviously if I'm engaging my core muscles, they're all around that little plastic tube that my body knows is not supposed to be there. So they get a little like, whoa, wait, even though it's been here for so long. And then when I get really hungry, if I haven't run my feeds or haven't been drinking water or snacking or like eating and my stomach is empty and angry, it'll start like trying to like eat my feeding tube because it thinks there's something in there to digest, and that is not a comfortable feeling. I also got the question is, what is the weirdest thing you've ever fed yourself through my tube? Some are weird juice concoctions that my mom made of like celeries and healthy stuff that I just didn't want to taste. And hangover cures. Every time I go out with my friends, not that that's like all the time, I'm not some like aggressive drinker, but whenever I go out with my friends, I will make a hangover cure before I leave and have it set up in my tube ready to go, so that when I get home from the bars, I can just plug myself in and go to bed. And it's like got electrolytes, vitamin C, all this good stuff, so that I wake up and I don't have a hangover. I also get asked a lot on social media and just by people who know me in real life if the feeding tube is something I'm gonna have to have forever. And my best answer to this question is I don't know. I would love to not have to need it. It would be great, but I'm also at the same time very grateful for the tool that I have while it's here. It has saved my life and kept me alive for the past 5 years, and so for that I am very grateful. And sometimes my stomach will be doing better and I'll think maybe I can not rely on the feeding tube again, but then I'll go into a flare-up, or I won't be able to tolerate liquids, or something will happen and it'll just kind of knock me back down to square one. And that's okay, because I'm grateful for the progress that I've made, but I don't know if I can say when and if I will be getting my feeding tube taken out ever. But that's okay. It's just like a fun little accessory. That was the majority of the questions I got. And I don't want this video to be too long and yappy, because the last video I posted was actually a long yappy video. You were supposed to get a vlog this week, but then I remembered it was Feeding Tube Awareness Week and we changed gears really quick. So thank you so much for sitting around and watching and hearing me yap about feeding tubes. If you have any more questions, please send them my way. I'm always happy to talk about them and answer any questions, or really like talk about anything you're curious about. And I will make more videos on how that is integrated into other parts of my life with like work, school, sports, things like that. But for now, happy Feeding Tube Awareness Week.